he's been right in the center of this for some time, and he does not mess around. And he is the former Attorney General of Kansas, now with the Armistead Group. Hey, Attorney General Klein, great to have you with us.
Great to be with you, John.
So, Phil, I know you've been working really, really hard, like 20 hours a day. Give us an update, Phil. Where are we now on the election fraud, these states that should have gone to Trump? What's the plan now?
Well, we will file litigation this afternoon in Washington, D.C., challenging the fact that the legislatures in these various states are obligated under the Constitution to review the election to determine whether it was lawful and whether you can have faith in the results. But actually what's happening right now, John, is the legislatures in these key states can't even meet. The state laws don't allow them to gather unless the governor or legislative leadership allows it. So all they're doing is having committee hearings. But they can't meet as a body to review the election and determine who the presidential electors ought to be. In fact, in Michigan, the governor of Michigan locked out Republicans on Monday, December 14th, out of the Capitol building. They have those pass cards that you can use to get in and work, and she had the state police around the Capitol. She locked them out as the Democrats gathered and certified electors. So this is the kind of stuff that's happening in the country, and we plan to challenge that in court. And I'll also say that it's... go ahead. I'm sorry, John.
Are you filing this, Attorney General Klein, are you filing this with the Supreme Court or in state courts?
It's going to be filed in federal district court, and we would plan to appeal it up. We can't file directly with the Supreme Court because we represent private voters and legislators and groups that don't have standing or the ability to file directly in the Supreme Court with jurisdiction, like the Texas suit had. So we'll file in federal district court, and we plan to fight that all the way up. The other thing that ought to be happening is Congress ought to be taking a look at this, and additionally, state legislatures should try to force a gathering, a joint session. They're trying to do that in Pennsylvania and other states. So it's not over. Inauguration Day is January 20th, and all these other deadlines are artificial congressional deadlines in statute. They have nothing to do with the Constitution.
Right. So all the other dates, like they're all arbitrary dates and Associated Press dates and things like that. The only hardwired date is January 20th. That's where somebody's got to put their hand in the Bible and get sworn into office, whether it's Trump, Biden, or Speaker of the House, right? That could be a scenario also. It could be Pelosi until this gets resolved if there's an interim thing. But you have all these, you mentioned Michigan, we got the same thing going on, Phil, in Georgia, where all the governor has to do, Governor Kemp has to do, is convene a special session. That's all he has to do. And the electors, they'd all meet, and in one day, with the evidence presented, the second day they'd vote, and they would vote the electors to Trump based on the massive evidence of vote fraud in Georgia. Yet the governor will not call it. The leadership can do it with 50% plus one. They have easily those majorities in both houses. Speaker Ralston refuses to do it, lied to the president. Majority Leader of the Senate, Butch Miller, he lied, said he has to have 3/5. He does not. He didn't do it. So you got the leadership. You have the governor won't do it. And you got these two guys, these two Senate's incumbents running, Perdue and Loeffler, and they chirp about it, but they don't do anything. In fact, they're going to a big fundraiser tonight in Athens, Georgia, headed by Brian Kemp, the governor, who has refused to call the special session that could overturn the results and also help them win by getting rid of the fraud that's happening again. This blows your mind, Phil.
Yeah, it does. And the evidence of fraud and the evidence of wrongdoing or lawlessness is widespread. In each one of these states, local election officials first accepted millions, tens of millions, in fact, hundreds of millions of dollars flowed from Mark Zuckerberg through a charity back to them, and used those monies to violate state laws protecting the integrity of the ballot. And created a two-tier election system. So with that, every legislature out there can recognize that this was a lawless election. And those changes in law, or actually sidestepping the law by local officials, prevent us from having faith in the election results. And that is the standard that the state legislatures have in determining whether they should certify the results. So you're absolutely right, John, that most of these legislatures would act with a majority to not certify. But there's a minority of people under state law, the governor, and sometimes state leadership, who are preventing them from actually meeting. So they have the constitutional responsibility to certify the selection of the electors, but they can't even meet.
All right, so I get Whitmer, right? I get Whitmer. She's a Democrat. She was in Biden's fantasy cabinet. She got nominated for Candy Lady of Energy or something. So I get that. But it's the Republican governors, Ducey in Arizona, Kemp in Georgia, right? These are the two battleground states. The other two have Democratic governors, Michigan, Wisconsin, Democratic governor, Pennsylvania. They have two Republican governors. They could call a special session today at 8 a.m. For the life of me, their leadership and the governors refuse to do it so that the steal can go on. And what do they think is going to happen to them? I mean, do they think, like, this is a good thing, like the Trump voters are just going to say, oh, okay, and go away? Coupled with the fact that you go to Georgia and the steal in the runoff, Attorney General Klein, is bigger than it was on November 3rd because there's nobody stopping them. They've got more drop boxes. Now they got mobile voting RVs that go around to high-propensity Democratic areas in Atlanta and Fulton County, ringing their bell like the ice cream man. You come out and you vote. These are illegal. They're nowhere in the Constitution. You can't have this. They're just doing it. You got 80,000 people they registered, can't find where they came from, and you got 1.5 million absentee ballots they just mailed out. They ended up, somebody told me the other day, on the counter at Starbucks, and they do nothing. Don't they understand that the Democrats are going to bake this in and they're never going to win again?
Well, I think unfortunately, a lot of elected leaders engage in what I call ghost wrestling. And that is they look at public opinion polls, they assess what their future is politically. They dream about that if somebody that is higher up on the ticket or more powerful within the Republican Party either fades away or dies in a plane crash, they might become emperor. And so all of the decisions that they make are gauged on some future measurement rather than deciding what is right with the information before them at the time. And I think that's a lot of what's happening. Everybody out there is trying to gauge how the public generally will respond to their decisions rather than make the decision that is right to make. And I'm afraid that's happening with these governors. They are protecting their ambitions. They're protecting what they perceive to be important for their political future rather than simply looking at the massive disregard for state law in managing these elections.
It's just so frustrating. With us, former Attorney General Phil Klein of Kansas, and now heading up is it called the Armistead? Am I saying it the right way? The Armistead Project? Amistad. Yeah. Project, and I know you're working night and day on this. Phil, give us an honest assessment of the chances that we know you filed the suit in federal court. They're going to do nothing with it. You're going to end up kicking it up to the Supreme Court. Is any court ever going to take on one of our cases for an evidentiary hearing?
Well, they should. And I'll tell you this. There's two parts to that question, John. First of all, I think it's unlikely in the immediate future to impact the 2020 election. But it's not impossible, and the court should. This was an unprecedented election where one individual spent more money than the federal government spent in managing the election and dictated how local election officials should conduct the election. That is unlawful. It's not proper. The court should act, but they're fearful. I will say that eventually the court will act. Maybe not in time to impact the 2020 election, but we have lawsuits against this charity that funneled all this Zuckerberg money into the elections, and we intend to pursue it. And that includes discovery, what is called discovery in a legal proceeding. We get to subpoena documents. We get to demand that people answer questions, and we will pursue that case to its ultimate conclusion.
Phil Klein with us, heading up the Amistad Project. He's also former Attorney General from Kansas. I got a question here from Den in Chesapeake, Virginia. He says, please ask Attorney General Klein about who was preventing the GPS tracking info for the trailer that went missing in Pennsylvania. Why can't this be obtained?
It's a great question, and I am beyond disappointed in the Office of Inspector General of the United States Postal Service, which took up this investigation. We had 250,000 completed ballots transferred from New York across state lines into Pennsylvania, where the trucker's trailer disappeared with those ballots inside. It has GPS tracking, yet the postal inspector, to our knowledge, has not done anything to find that trailer, nor have they even spoken with, to our knowledge, the expediter, the person at the postal facility in New York that said that she oversaw the loading of ballots, completed ballots, to be shipped out multiple times at that facility, a facility that doesn't even process mail. Rather, what the Inspector General has done is demanded an opportunity to interview the trucker Jesse Morgan's mother and also his ex-wife. I don't know what they're doing, but they're certainly not investigating election fraud.
They're just trying to get the clock to run out. That's all. I mean, it's obvious as the nose on your face. Why were ballots in a facility in New York that doesn't process ballots? Why were Pennsylvania ballots in New York? Is there a logical explanation for that? Phil Klein?
Well, I suppose that in October, 250,000 Pennsylvanians decided to vacation in Bethpage, New York, and mail their ballots back on the same day.
It's incredible. I mean, this is the biggest scam, the biggest vote fraud scam in the history of the Republic, just like Sidney Powell said. It is bigger than you can imagine, and they're just all stalling to run the clock out till he puts his hand on the Bible. The same thing is happening again in Georgia in this runoff on the 5th. That's why Lynn Wood filed for an injunction. We got the same machines. We got everything is the same. Drop boxes, no chain of custody, mail-in ballots showing up at Starbucks counters. Unbelievable, Phil. All right, I'm gonna open this up to some phone calls because you, my friend, former Attorney General Kansas Phil Klein, are what you call a hot ticket. So let's go to Cherie in Texas, line 1. Cherie, you're on with former Kansas Attorney General Phil Klein.
Oh, wow. I didn't realize I was going to be talking to Phil Klein.
What an honor, right?
Yes, it is. It definitely is an honor. I was trying to listen to the radio show and couldn't get on it, but a couple of things I wanted to say. The Supreme Court deciding that Texas voters were not disenfranchised by the chaos in other states. I felt disenfranchised on the morning of November the 4th. It seems like my vote didn't count because of all the hundreds of thousands of ineligible voters in other states. And I sit here in Texas and I go, what can I do to help? What can I do besides call my congressmen, call my senators? What can we in the other states out here, what can we do to help you guys?
Well, thank you for the question, Shereen. And I would suggest a couple of things. First of all, is demand action by your state legislature and also demand action by members of Congress. Members of Congress can review this election, and it doesn't take that many to start the review. A congressman and a senator need to ask for it, and that automatically kicks it in. So if people start making these phone calls, there's one good thing about when I was in the legislature, we called them squishes. They were people who did not have principle, but they believed that their primary responsibility was to hold on to the authority in the office. And the great thing about them is they become one of you. If you start pressuring them and they start becoming fearful that they might not win the next election. So Americans have to speak up.
Well, I've been speaking up. I've called my senators and I've called my congressmen. I also wanted to add just one more thing. I find it very offensive, personally, watching all of these witnesses come forward and share their stories, risk their life, risk their reputation, risk being doxxed, risk all these things to tell the truth, to stand up for justice. And yet the people whose salaries that they pay, who they elected, are worried about being doxxed, are worried about people coming to their house and harassing them, it was okay for their constituents to do that, to speak out and run the risk of losing their jobs and all the risks that came with that.
Wow.
But the people whose salaries that they pay don't have the guts to stand up for their own constituents who are putting their lives on the line. I don't understand it. I find it offensive.
Mr. Klein?
Well, yeah, I think that's an excellent point. What we consider political courage today is really rather cheap, and it's just the potential of maybe losing an election or having some bad press coverage. That's not courage. Mm-hmm. And we've had people come forward who have lost their jobs and do face other repercussions because of their willingness to speak out, and they deserve to be supported.
Is there anything that we can do to support them? I mean, is there a fund, a GoFundMe page to help these people who've lost their jobs? Because I want to help people who are honorable. Okay.
And I appreciate you mentioning that. Two of our whistleblowers, Jesse Morgan, the truck driver who drove from Bethpage into Pennsylvania, and also Ethan Pease, who was a postal subcontractor in Wisconsin, both lost their jobs. And they have a GoFundMe, and it can be found if you go to www.got-freedom.org/brave, BRAVE. That is a link to their GoFundMe.
Great, because I would love to help people who are honorable and want to stand up for the truth, and we need to vote everybody out who doesn't want to stand up for,
Cherie,
for
thank
their
you.
jobs as Americans.
Thank you for the call. I'm sorry. You see, Attorney General Klein, I mean, there's outrage. And this is one of probably 1,000 callers I've gotten since November 4th. People are just outraged by the fact that nobody will do anything. And, we sit here now, December 22nd, wondering, what is the pathway for Trump to get inaugurated? Is there any pathway, Attorney General Klein, that still exists? And I have a minute.
Well, yes. There can be state legislatures who do gather and declare that their state election is in dispute. That arguably kicks it over to Congress, and Congress would vote to determine who the next president would be if they agree that the elections are in dispute and the vice president doesn't have the 270 electoral votes to count for either Mr. Trump or Mr. Biden. So that option is still open. I doubt the Supreme Court will act, although that they should act, particularly as it relates to all the private funds that dictated how the election was going to be run.
Unbelievable. Former Attorney General of Kansas, Phil Klein, now heading up Amistad Project as he tries to get to the bottom of this election fraud. He's been working tirelessly, and he's been lighting up radio shows, TV, wherever they can get him, trying to spread the word and spread the truth. He is a truth trucker. Hey, Phil Klein, thank you for being with us, sir.
Thank you, John.
Thank you.